Within the tranquil municipality of North Rhine-Westphalia, Joseph Goebbels emerged into existence on October 29th, 1897, born to a household firmly anchored in Catholic traditions. His father, Friedrich Goebbels, a meticulous bookkeeper, alongside his mother, Maria Oldenhausen, molded the formative years of this future architect of propaganda. Nevertheless, Goebbels' youth was darkened by hardship when, at merely 4 years of age, osteomyelitis struck his right limb, rendering him with a permanent limp. This bodily affliction not only scarred his physical form, but penetrated his spirit, becoming a source of shame that would influence his fate, compelling him to seek sanctuary within his household's confines. Within the isolation of his family's cellar, this young boy, condemned by disease, discovered comfort amongst weathered volumes and reference works. This enforced seclusion, combined with his small build, garnered him the mocking epithet ungebleichter Zwerg among those who perceived him as a diminished Germanic figure. Thus, from the foundations of a youth characterized by ailment and social rejection, arose the individual who would ultimately ascend as the virtuoso of persuasive communication during the chaotic era of the Third Reich. This exploration through Goebbels' formative recollections provides an exceptional viewpoint on the origins that developed into the intricacy of his personality, sketching the commencement of a narrative that would create a permanent impression on 20th century chronicles. Joseph Goebbels' persistence manifested itself from his earliest years as the asymmetrical nature of his limbs necessitated orthopedic footwear, an essential adjustment to compensate for the disparity between his right and left legs. Despite this physical handicap, his mental capacity blazed brilliantly within academic circles, establishing himself as the premier student upon successfully finishing secondary education in 1917. The commencement of the Great War in 1914 thrust Goebbels into frustration as his ambition to enlist in the Imperial German military was blocked by his physical limitations. Incapable of joining the battle, he observed helplessly as calamity befell his homeland. This era of powerlessness and dejection created a lasting impression on young Goebbels. Lacking a defined path forward, his anxious parents proposed he consider ecclesiastical service. Initially, Goebbels consented and enrolled with the Albertus Magnus Society, receiving mentorship from Johannes Müller. However, his spirit found no fulfillment in religious scholarship, and in a decision that defied parental wishes, he abandoned this course, seeking his authentic academic calling. Goebbels' academic pursuit faced monetary obstacles. The household requested a loan of 964 marks from the Albertus Magnus Society, pledging long-term repayment without interest. The application received Johannes Müller's endorsement, who declared, "Herr Goebbels represents the offspring of devout Catholics, and his faith and ethics render him deserving of complete recommendation." Goebbels' shift from theological studies to higher education signified the start of a path that would position him to assume a pivotal function in the turbulent occurrences that characterized the 20th century. Advancing through academic excellence, Joseph Goebbels, as a scholarship beneficiary, established his presence across 8 institutions before obtaining his degree with honors from Berlin University in 1921. That identical year, he concluded his educational journey by securing a doctorate from Heidelberg University, where he delivered an exceptional dissertation on Wilhelm von Schütz under the supervision of scholar Friedrich von Waldberg. His academic expedition not only resulted in scholarly achievements, but also signified a phase of intense dedication to philology and German literary studies. Absorbed in the creations of distinguished literary figures, Goebbels demonstrated an inherent capacity to examine and place within context the intricacies of language and storytelling. This scholarly passion became the foundation of his expertise in verbal manipulation, a gift that would assume a pivotal function in his future role as the Reich's propaganda minister. However, beyond educational accomplishments, the political climate of that period created an enduring influence on his university years. Observing the chaotic consequences of warfare and political disorder in Germany, Goebbels discovered himself submerged in a cauldron of ideological passion. These political disruptions nourished the origins of his extremist convictions, establishing the groundwork for his subsequent dedication to radical nationalism. His vigorous involvement in nationalist student organizations and his enthusiasm for racial doctrines prevalent during that time previewed his adoption of Nazi philosophy. Within this melting pot of influences, Goebbels cultivated an intense devotion to concepts of racial superiority and the revival of a Germany he viewed as endangered and fragmented. Following his period within university lecture halls, Joseph Goebbels immersed himself in professional life, initially serving as a clerk in Cologne and subsequently as a securities trader on the stock market. Nevertheless, his heart pulsed with a passion that surpassed numerical calculations and financial dealings, for what genuinely awakened his spirit was the craft of language and public speaking. From his youth, Goebbels directed his affection for literature and eloquence through composition, crafting passionate articles and theatrical works that he submitted, hopefully, to publications and publishing houses. Yet the gateway to artistic achievement remained sealed. Persistent in his pursuit of expression and acknowledgement, Goebbels expanded his literary endeavors by proposing himself as an editor for the esteemed Berliner Tageblatt. However, fortune did not favor these ventures, leaving behind a series of setbacks in his wake. During this moment of disenchantment, destiny directed him toward a different route: politics. By coincidence, Goebbels encountered pamphlets from the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which he enthusiastically consumed and distributed among his associates. This casual discovery marked the commencement of his involvement in the tumultuous currents of German nationalism, a journey that would elevate him to positions of authority in subsequent years. The 1920s in Germany constituted a breeding ground for emerging radical political movements. And within this environment, Goebbels discovered fertile soil for the development of his extremist ideologies. Motivated by the pledge of national resurrection, he passionately enlisted in the Nazi Party ranks. This transformative period signified not only his political entry, but also the initiation of a mutually beneficial relationship with Adolf Hitler, who promptly recognized in Goebbels a cunning and convincing individual. During his initial years of active NSDAP participation, Goebbels distinguished himself through his eloquence and oratorical abilities, rapidly becoming an ardent spokesman and advocate for the Nazi mission. His inflammatory addresses resonated within his followers' hearts, propelling him to a prominent position within the movement. In January 1924's opening days, Joseph Goebbels became embroiled in a crucial political discourse that transcended the divisions separating socialists and National Socialists. At a pivotal juncture, he received an invitation to mount the platform and address the gathering. With a voice that echoed like history's summons, Goebbels commenced his address with the enduring phrase, "My cherished German countrymen." Nevertheless, the mere suggestion of his National Socialist Association ignited the rage of the socialists present, who, amidst jeers and verbal abuse, branded him a capitalist and exploiter. Confronted with this challenging circumstance, Goebbels, undaunted, pointed defiantly toward his critics and declared, "That gentleman there who labels me a capitalist, step forward, please, and demonstrate, as I shall, the currency you possess. Let us observe who carries more." Through a dramatic gesture, he displayed a nearly vacant wallet, a symbolic demonstration that resonated with the audience. The thunderous ovation that ensued represented the enthusiastic response of those who recognized in Goebbels a courageous rhetorical champion. This incident, more than a simple anecdote, represented the defining moment that drew Goebbels into the National Socialist German Workers' Party ranks. Goebbels formalized his party membership with number 8762, a symbol of his newly established commitment to National Socialism's doctrines and aspirations. The fortuitous meeting with Adolf Hitler in 1924 established a landmark in Goebbels' existence. Both oratory masters mutually impressed one another. Hitler, recently freed from imprisonment following the unsuccessful Munich Putsch, perceived in Goebbels an essential instrument for his political campaign. This partnership would echo significantly in coming years. In 1926, Hitler assigned Goebbels what seemed an impossible mission: deployment to Berlin, the most formidable stronghold for any National Socialist. Berlin, a metropolis that demonstrated preference for conservative monarchist or leftist factions, represented hostile ground for the NSDAP. Goebbels, equipped with Mein Kampf beneath his arm, arrived at Potsdamer Bahnhof station, confronting adversity with resolve. As Berlin's NSDAP leader, Goebbels undertook the monumental task of establishing order and discipline among the party's adherents in the capital. His strategies encompassed economic approaches such as implementing monthly dues and selling rally tickets, to restructuring the brown shirt SA militias under Kurt Daluege's command. Furthermore, he established a local publication titled Der Angriff, the attack, and exhibited bold posters with blazing red typography challenging public sentiment. Lenin or Hitler or the Kaiser, America speaks in Berlin. These audacious measures served a clear objective: generating controversy and discourse regarding the party. Goebbels, cognizant of notoriety's power, expressed his intention through forceful language. Berliners must revile us, defame us, combat us, strike us, but they must discuss us. Within Berlin's hostile crucible, Goebbels forged his reputation as a tireless strategist and skilled manipulator of public perception, whose methods would reverberate throughout interwar Germany's turbulent political history. In propaganda, as in romance, all methods are permissible, Goebbels proclaimed. A falsehood repeated countless times transforms into truth. These maxims, infused with NSDAP propaganda fervor, also encapsulate Goebbels' rhetorical shrewdness and expertise. His legacy, however, remains stained by truth manipulation and the advancement of perilous narratives that contributed to an infamous regime's propaganda apparatus. Joseph Goebbels' addresses became genuine spectacles that none wished to miss, displaying oratory blessed with incomparable magnetism and vigor that mobilized crowds with nearly hypnotic power. Before each speech, Goebbels, the microphone virtuoso, would inquire of his collaborators, "What recording shall we perform today?" Thus commenced an unprecedented propaganda experience. Each of Goebbels' speeches transformed into an event heavy with symbolism, accompanied by processions, parades, banner displays, chants, and choruses that intensified the fervent atmosphere. Punctuality was not among his strengths. Aware that delay added tangible tension among audiences anticipating the climactic moment of waiting. Goebbels' rallies, inflamed by his fiery disposition, frequently resulted in violent disruptions when communists attempted to sabotage the National Socialists. These confrontations, laden with tension, sometimes produced injuries on both sides. However, Goebbels, a masterful manipulator of public perception, transformed his wounded supporters into martyrs, elevating them to heroic status in the public consciousness. Nonetheless, violence at these gatherings sometimes prompted police intervention and the suspension of NSDAP meetings for public safety reasons. Swiftly, Goebbels would adapt the rally's purpose, converting it into a sporting or tourism event, demonstrating strategic adaptability that marked his mastery in propaganda artistry. Following the NSDAP's historic triumph in the 1933 elections, which secured the party 107 seats in the Reichstag, Joseph Goebbels ascended to deputy status. This new position not only provided him with an expanded political platform, but also offered opportunities to intensify the party's propaganda machinery through innovative tactics and more efficient methods. Goebbels, a masterful propaganda strategist, deployed an unprecedented array of promotional methods. Broadcasting his addresses via radio transmitted his message to Germany's most remote regions, while the extensive distribution of 50,000 phonograph records amplified his auditory reach throughout the nation. Moreover, screening documentary films in diverse locations, from auditoriums to athletic centers, public parks, cafes, and dining establishments, ensured his message penetrated multiple societal strata, extending even beyond traditional boundaries. Goebbels showcased his creativity by contracting aircraft to scatter leaflets from above, bearing the compelling message, "The Führer descends from the heavens." These daring methods reflected his capacity to embrace contemporary media and his unwavering resolve to disseminate National Socialist doctrine. Joseph Goebbels' heart discovered its most complete expression through his romantic relationship with Magda Quandt, a connection that reached its zenith in matrimony. Magda discovered affection with Goebbels during her employment as a clerk in the NSDAP archives. Their bond was immediate, and on December 12, 1931, with Adolf Hitler serving as groomsman, Joseph Goebbels and Magda exchanged vows. This romance yielded a household that pioneered the tradition of honoring Hitler by designating their 6 offspring with the letter H. Additionally, Goebbels embraced the paternal role for Harold, Magda's 10-year-old boy from her prior union, who would subsequently become a Luftwaffe aviator. This familial connection strengthened the interweaving of Goebbels' and Magda's existences, establishing a bond that would endure through the turbulent years that followed. The ferocity and hostility of Joseph Goebbels' addresses in the Reichstag achieved such magnitude that in February 1932, Parliament banished him and revoked his deputy position for insulting President Paul von Hindenburg. This critical juncture threatened to transform Goebbels into a political pariah, as in April he confronted charges of high treason by the Reichstag. However, Goebbels' circumstances underwent a dramatic reversal in January 1933 when the NSDAP assumed control following the elections, and Adolf Hitler emerged as Führer of the Third Reich. This transformation of events restored Goebbels' diminished prestige and positioned him once more at the political arena's center. On March 13, 1933, Joseph Goebbels received appointment as the Third Reich's propaganda minister and simultaneously assumed the role of Berlin's Gauleiter. These duties, which he would maintain until his life's conclusion, solidified his standing as a pivotal figure in the Nazi regime's propaganda mechanism. Until that moment, Goebbels' complete journey in the power struggle was chronicled in two personal memoirs he authored under the titles The Battle for Berlin, Kampf um Berlin, reflecting his distinctive perspective on the events that transported him from political ostracism's margins to the Nazi regime's upper echelons. Among Joseph Goebbels' initial schemes as propaganda minister was collaborating in constructing a deceptive narrative designed to consolidate Adolf Hitler's authority. This intrigue materialized in creating a fabrication intended to blame the Reichstag fire on the communists. The masterful implementation of this strategy proved tremendously successful, enabling the National Socialists to convince President von Hindenburg to decree the prohibition of political parties, labor unions, and associations, thereby consolidating the regime's authoritarian dominance. The subsequent year, 1934, Goebbels assumed a vital role in another plot aimed at discrediting and purging the SA Sturmabteilung. He manufactured a supposed betrayal within this paramilitary organization, leading to a savage purge known as the Night of the Long Knives. During this operation, the SS under Heinrich Himmler executed summary killings, including that of SA leader Ernst Röhm. By contributing to this masterful maneuver of political manipulation, Goebbels further strengthened Hitler's and the SS's positions within the Third Reich's structure. During his term as the Third Reich's propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels embarked on completely appropriating German culture, crafting a narrative that mirrored pan-Germanic principles and National Socialism's virtues. Employing strategic mastery, he rapidly consolidated his authority over newspapers, radio, and all media outlets. His greatest conquest, however, was the cinema industry. Goebbels secured his dominance over Universum Film AG UFA Studios, transforming them into a potent propaganda instrument for projecting films that glorified Nazi ideology. Among his remarkable accomplishments was contracting filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl, responsible for the acclaimed documentaries Olympia and The Triumph of the Will. These works, internationally celebrated, premiered alongside the 1936 Berlin Olympics, serving as cinematic vehicles for broadcasting the regime's magnificence on the global stage. Goebbels achieved prominence through the Trans-Ocean Press Agency, a political network that wove an extensive web of journalists worldwide. This network, comprising 83 specialists in London alone and countless collaborators in other nations, published 300 newspapers promoting National Socialist ideology and contributed articles to another 350 publications. Goebbels' propaganda apparatus extended globally, establishing Nazism's presence within the international media realm. While Joseph Goebbels advanced National Socialist culture, he spared no energy in neutralizing and silencing opposition voices. His initial target was the expropriation of Ullstein House, the same publisher that had rejected one of his compositions when he had recently departed university. Rapidly, he established a blacklist encompassing newspapers, magazines, and publishers deemed unpatriotic, while also pursuing books and publications by writers suspected of being communists, Freemasons, or Jews. Among these figures were Karl Marx, Stefan Zweig, Erich Kästner, Heinrich Heine, and Sigmund Freud. These works were sentenced to flames in massive public bonfires, a symbolic gesture of cultural suppression. Demonstrating propagandistic ingenuity, Goebbels even organized an exhibition of degenerate art to disparage works by celebrated artists such as Pierre-Auguste Renoir, Vincent van Gogh, and Paul Gauguin. Beyond the political sphere, Goebbels' wealth expanded considerably through his salary. The 4,000 Reichsmarks he earned for each article in the newspaper Das Reich, and profits from his book Der Bolschewismus in Theorie und Praxis, Bolshevism in Theory and Practice. This lucrative income stream enabled him to acquire multiple estates in locations such as Schwanenwerder, Wannsee, and Rundorf. Additionally, he possessed a luxurious armored Mercedes automobile, a gift from Hitler, equipped with 8mm bulletproof and mine-resistant bodywork. Goebbels' private life was equally characterized by extravagance and scandal. His steady income flow permitted him to enjoy numerous mistresses, typically secretaries, young NSDAP members, or actresses. In 1938, his marriage to Magda approached collapse when she discovered his affair with Czechoslovakian actress Lida Barova, a neighbor at the Schwanenwerder estate. Hitler's intervention, who expelled the Czech lover from the country, prevented the divorce and preserved the appearance of stability in the Goebbels marriage. 3 days following World War II's commencement, on September 3, 1939, the German submarine U-30 destroyed the British liner SS Athenia, claiming 112 passengers' lives, including several American citizens. Goebbels immediately exploited this tragic incident to weave a masterful deception through the newspaper Völkischer Beobachter. In an article, he claimed that the British themselves had sunk the Athenia to blame the Third Reich and compel the United States into the conflict. This incident, along with others manipulated throughout the war, illustrates Goebbels' mastery of propaganda manipulation. One of Goebbels' infamous schemes involved accepting France's surrender in 1940 within the identical railway car where the Armistice of Compiègne had been signed following Germany's capitulation in World War I. This humiliation endured by the French 2 decades after inflicting it upon the Germans represented an astute concept by Goebbels to consolidate German victory. In 1941, with the Soviet Union's invasion, Goebbels excelled in broadcasting victories over the Red Army through radio, accompanied by fanfares and Richard Wagner's compositions. In his relentless persecution of Jews, he justified their isolation in Polish ghettos through films such as Jud Süß, Jew Süß, Der ewige Jude, The Eternal Jew, and Die Rothschilds, The Rothschilds. Goebbels not only managed domestic propaganda, but also provided a platform on Radio Hamburg to William Joyce, an Englishman from the British Union of Fascists, to broadcast propaganda against England and recruit volunteers for the SS's British Free Corps. Additionally, Goebbels assumed the role of fortune teller alongside Hitler, exploring horoscopes and Nostradamus' prophecies to predict battlefield outcomes. On February 13, 1943, merely 11 days following defeat at the Battle of Stalingrad, Goebbels declared total war during a rally at Berlin's Sports Palace. From that moment, he mobilized the German populace, including children and elderly citizens, within the Volkssturm known as the People's Army. In early 1945, in a desperate effort to resist the unstoppable advance of the Red Army from the east and the Allies from the west, Hitler appointed Goebbels as Berlin's defender. From radio microphones, Goebbels issued commands to implement the scorched earth strategy, urging Germans to destroy everything in their path and leave only ashes for the approaching enemy. In a chilling development, he denounced the Geneva Convention, encouraging the capital's defenders to execute any American and British pilots who might have parachuted after being shot down. Throughout the war's final days, Goebbels did not abandon his faith in astrology or miraculous omens. For example, he interpreted U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's death as fortune provided by astrological forces, assuring Hitler of this through a telephone conversation. These concluding moments mark the climax of Goebbels' career as a National Socialist propaganda strategist, taking his methods to brutal extremes and demonstrating unwavering devotion to Hitler even during the most desperate circumstances. Coinciding with Hitler's 56th birthday celebration, Goebbels relocated to the bunker beneath the Chancellery to share the identical destiny with him. He transported his wife Magda and their 6 offspring, who took refuge underground to escape being struck by explosive devices and Soviet artillery bombardment. They remained there for 10 days, with the Goebbels family witnessing Hitler's matrimonial ceremony to Eva Braun and the Führer's declaration of his intention to terminate everything. Magda, unable to be contained by her spouse, implored Hitler not to proceed, but her efforts proved futile. The ominous fate overshadowed the regime. With the Führer's demise on April 30th, merely 1 day following his marriage to Eva Braun, a day following Hitler's self-inflicted death on May 1st, 1945, both Goebbels and Magda resolved to encounter the identical fate to prevent falling into Soviet custody. Both concurred to eliminate their offspring first when Magda uttered the following declaration: "My offspring are too precious to exist in a world devoid of National Socialism." It was at that moment that Magda administered sleeping medication to her 6 young ones and subsequently poisoned them with cyanide, with only Harold, Magda's son from her previous marriage, surviving as he remained a captive in Great Britain due to his function as an aviator. Merely hours afterward, at 6:15 p.m., the couple ascended to the Chancellery courtyard, walking arm in arm. First, Goebbels raised his firearm and discharged it into Magda's heart. Then he consumed a cyanide capsule and immediately fired upon himself in the head. After completing the grisly ceremony, SS guards carried the corpses to a shell crater and cremated them with petrol. With Joseph Goebbels' ashes, the words of one of the Third Reich's principal leaders dissolved into the atmosphere permanently. This crucial figure in National Socialism's historical victory was regarded as the 20th century's finest propagandist.